What's up, Cerebral football fans? My name is Steven Hyder. This is Gate City Sports Channel. And you guys can tell from today's topic what we're going to be talking about today. The Dallas Cowboys came out and basically told everybody that they're going to be starting their starters for this Saturday night's game. So now the question really kind of falls on Philadelphia. Do we rest our guys and not really worried about seeding between the 6th and the 7th seed and just say you play who's in front of you? It doesn't matter at this point. You're going to have to play the better teams if you want to advance anyways. So you might as well just play who's in front of you. Or do you play your starters and do you try to get favorable matchups inside the postseason? And that's kind of the question we find ourselves in. But before we dive down deep into today's kind of topic here, guys, there's a few things I want to talk about, which is the news that kind of came out and broke about what happened with the Eagles in terms of the reserve C19 list. You guys know I'm not saying it for a specific reason. So here's the players that popped up. It was 12 in total. So Jannard Avery, Fletcher Cox, Marcus Epps, Dallas Goedert, Nate Herbig, Jordan Howard, Jason Kelsey, Avonte Maddox, Rodney McLeod, Boston Scott, Alex Singleton, and Jack Stahl. But I'm going to expand upon that for you a little bit. It's more than just those 12 players. It actually hit the practice squad as well. So the PSC19 list is as follows. You got John Hightower, Craig James, Keyshawn Johnson, and Noah Togiai, I believe is how you say his name. So in total, you really got 16 guys that are on this list. So it makes putting together a 46-man game day roster, active game day roster, kind of challenging. And that's kind of what I did this morning as I was preparing my show notes for you guys today. I sat down, I was thinking to myself, I can't predict who doesn't meet the guidelines in the NFL, right? So the NFL has kind of changed some things. So one of the things they've done is they've done some things around their return to play policy. And I see a lot of confusion around the policy, so I want to explain a couple of things for everybody. Number one, they have expanded upon return to play for the playoffs, meaning because of what's going on with the C19 list, it's no longer that you can only elevate a guy twice before you have to give him an NFL contract, or you got to waive him and expose him to the waiver wire. Now you can actually bring up as many players as you need, whether they've been active for 2 games or not, for the postseason only. So they're definitely doing some things. Now, the things that impact us this week has to do with getting guys back on the field. And that really has to do with their measuring their CT, what they call the CT value. Guys are talking about viral load. That's what they're referring to. And basically, if you test in a certain window, then you can come back after 1 day. Basically, it means you might still technically have it, but your viral load is so low that they deem, I'm not deeming this, guys. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm none of those things. But they deem that you can't transmit. You cannot pass it on to another person, basically. You're not contagious anymore. So that's why they give you the 1 day window. Now, the curveball to this is if a player is not vaccinated, then they have to go through that mandatory 10 days separated from the team, all that kind of stuff. There's no way around that. So I can't predict guys like these 16 players, the 4 on the practice squad, the 12 that are on the active roster. I can't predict it, guys. I have no clue. I have absolutely no idea what their status is with any of this stuff. I'm not going to pretend to know it. All I'm going to do is we can play a game today and say, it's Monday. We're likely going to get some of these guys back, but let's build in some contingencies, right? Let's build in our contingencies to kind of account for what could or could not occur here, what may or may not occur, if you will. Because, like I said, I can't predict it. What I can look at here is see that you got a lot of defensive players on this list. You got Jannard Avery, you have Fletcher Cox, you have Marcus Epps. Those are pretty big ones. Avonte Maddox kind of hurts in the slot. Rodney McLeod's on this list. That's 5 right there. Alex Singleton makes 6. 6 of the 12, I guess you can say it's half and half, Gate, technically. But those are some pretty big names. I mean, every guy that we named there has played significant time for the Eagles. And that's where it's kind of hitting us a little bit. And then as I kind of looked at it, I was trying to look at what's on the practice squad, try to do the best I can to remember the call-up procedures and who's been called up and how this might or may or may not impact us. And then I try to put together a 46-man roster, active day roster. So what I'll start off by saying is this, guys. I looked over the offensive line. I was like, okay, like this is kind of challenging, right? Because some of the offensive players that are on the C19 list is Nate Herbig and Jason Kelsey. I think what's really impactful here is if we're talking about playing or rest the guys, right? I see a lot of your comments saying rest the guys. Well, we're talking about resting the guys. We're down our starting center and the guy who maybe you would consider playing as a starting center with the backups. Now you could say, well, Nate Herbeck's really starting at right guard, so they would have probably given him the day off anyway. So we were already going to be facing this. That's potentially possible. But then I was like, okay, well, that gives us two guys we can plug from the practice squad and bring up there. So we can look at it that way too. My guess is that like I said, some of these guys will get cleared by Saturday, but I don't know either, guys. I don't know the exact situation going on here. So here's how I had things kind of starting offensive line. If we go backups, right? Left tackle, Andre Dillard. When I got to left guard, this is where things got a little more difficult to project. So I said Brett Toth. So left tackle, Andre Dillard. Left guard, Brett Toth. I went center. This is where it gets interesting, right? Because you could call up Luke Juriga from the practice squad. But what I did is Jack Anderson's already on the roster. He's kind of a guard center mix. So I just said I'm going to keep it simple and say Jack Anderson in that situation is my center. Right guard, Sua Opeta. I had there at right guard, Opeta, sorry. And then right tackle, LaRaven Clark. So my starting five, if we're looking at backups, would be Andre Dillard, Brett Toth, Jack Anderson at center, Sua Opeta at right guard, LaRaven Clark at right tackle. Now, because we can call some guys up, I did, the way I called them up was I called up Coyote Owasika from the practice squad. Some of you guys that know me probably like, that's not really a surprise, Gate. Of course you called up him. You always call him up, right? And then I also called up Luke Juriga. I called up Luke Juriga just because there's a part of me that believes they might play him at center. So you're going to want an interior guard center kind of guy that you can swing in there, right? The other person that is on the practice squad you could potentially consider as a call up here because of what's going on with the C19 list would be Casey Tucker. He could be kind of your swing tackle for the situation, but I kind of went with the flexibility of Brett Toth already kind of gives you that flexibility, right? LaRaven Clark can play guard, he can play tackle, he can play both sides, he can play 4 of the 5 positions, right? I look at a guy like Jack Anderson. Jack Anderson has some experience playing tackle and guard, and Jack Anderson's kind of like the guy that can play all 5 alignments on the offensive line. So I was like, okay, I mean, they may opt not to a Casey Tucker, but just for just to disclose it, full disclosure, you could do that. All right, so outside of that, starting quarterback, I said Gardner Minshew. And there's a chance that they don't even play Gardner Minshew. I'll admit that. They might only play him part of the game, or they might not play him at all, and they might just go with Reed Sinnett. I personally, for my own reasons, I'd like to see Gardner Minshew play because, number one, the young man deserves to put more film out there. So that way, if there's more interest in the young man, potentially he could get an opportunity to start for another organization. With that said, there's also the other side to it is I think Gardner Minshew is pretty good. And I do think that one thing that you can count on Gardner Minshew to do is to execute your offense. I don't think you're out of this game, even with your backups in with Gardner Minshew. I actually think he can execute the offense. And I think that it would be kind of funny if Dallas is in a pickle against our backups. So for my own personal reasons, I kind of wanted Gardner Minshew in there, but I could see the Eagles just going with Reed Sinnett. But I think that there'll be some kind of a weird split they'll do between Minshew and Reed Sinnett. I think they're going to give Minshew as many opportunities to put film out there as possible, would be my guess. Running backs gets tricky. Running backs really, really gets tricky because here's the thing. Right now, the only guy that we can count on the roster is Kenneth Gainwell because everybody else is on the list. They're on the C19 list. Jordan Howard's on the C9 list and Boston Scott's on the C9 list. And then, your starting running back he's injured. Miles Sanders still has the issue going on with the hand. So that really only leaves you Kenneth Gainwell. So you're going to have to, assuming the C19 list stays as it is. I mean, I can't, like I said, guys, I can't predict who will or won't be on the list, but assuming it does, the way I have things kind of falling around here is to basically have Kerryon Johnson caught up and then Jason Huntley also caught up. I will say that if anyone comes back from the list, Huntley would probably be one of the first people I would remove and keep on the prep. But as it is, Kerryon Johnson would probably start for me. Kenneth Gainwell will probably be the change of pace guy and receiving option, third down, 2-minute kind of guy. And then Jason Huntley could serve some special teams purpose and an emergency break glass in case of emergency type situation. The other place where we're in a real pickle is at tight end. The only healthy tight end we have on the roster is Tyree Jackson right now because we took hits with Jack Stahl being placed on the C19 list and Dallas Goedert being placed on the C19 list. Also has an impact on our running game since those two tight ends in particular are pretty good in the running game. They're pretty good at blocking. They're good. They're good blocking tight ends. So that leaves us with Tyree Jackson, who's a lot of effort in the run block, but he's not quite as skilled there. But he's a good receiving threat, and I would love to see him get some extended playing time. I would love to see what happened with something like that. And then in addition to that guy, You could look to the practice squad, and you could look at a guy like Richard Rodgers, who's still on our practice squad. He's got plenty of NFL experience. Richard Rodgers is a really good tight end. I would not hate Tyree Jackson and Richard Rodgers in a ball game. Now, Richard Rodgers, you'd have to make the decision. Are you going to elevate him? Are you going to use him as one of your C19 list guys you bring up? Or are you just going to do – because, you get 2 additional game day actives. So you can go to 48. So that would be your decision there. And then at wide receiver, guys, I think you have to play everybody that's available. I think you have to have Jalen Reagor in there, Quez Watkins in there, JJ, Greg Ward Jr. And then you also have to look at a guy like, maybe, playing even Devontae Smith for a certain extended amount of time just because you don't have a lot. Now, I don't think I would keep like Devontae and guys like that in the game fully, but you know what I mean? I would definitely. But I would definitely like look to maybe bring up a Deion Kane. Maybe Deion Kane is on the practice squad. This is another place we took a hit. On the practice squad, we took a hit on the C19 list because on the practice squad we lost Hightower, Keyshawn Johnson. That kind of puts us in a bind with those 2 guys in protocol. So we'll have to see what happens there with them in protocol. And then Noah Togiai was the tight end that was in protocol. So Togiai would have been a good game day call up too. And he's a pretty good blocking guy. And he can catch too. So yeah, as the NFL turns, if you will, guys, it is what it is, unfortunately, but we're definitely dealing with some stuff. There's no doubt about it. With that said, let's talk about the defense. I know this is probably the area you guys are a little bit more excited for is what would the defense look like in this backup situation and scenario. So here's how I had the defense going if we're going to be playing our reserves. So left defensive end, right defense, it doesn't really matter. Call it what you want to call it, guys. I don't think they're that set on which side you play, but Teron Jackson. Left defensive tackle, Hassan Ridgeway. Right defensive tackle, Milton Williams. Right defensive end, Ryan Kerrigan, potentially possibly being there, right? And then I kind of called up Cameron Malview from the practice squad because you're going to need another guy there. And I think he's that guy. Then you also have Milton Williams that you could flex if you need to. And then the main backup I had on the interior defensive line is Marlon Tuipulotu because he's on the roster. This is a game you use him if you're going to go with your backups, and you got him on your roster. Linebacker, it's kind of tricky. It's a little tricky because the 2 we have on roster are Sean Bradley and then Patrick Johnson. Those 2 guys I do think, have the potential to play, but, we have Jannard Avery being down currently because of the C19 list. Once again, guys, I can't project how fast or if they will. I don't know their status on some of that stuff. It's hard to project that. And then also Alex Singleton is down. So we're down 2 linebackers as well currently. Now, those guys could come back, and then that impacts your actives and inactives and what you can do on the practice squad. So as I looked at it, I'm like, okay, you have Christian Ellis, I don't know how you say his name, guys, on the practice squad, and you also have Jacoby Stevens. I called up Jacoby Stevens, just more of it because I know you guys, you want Jacoby Stevens in the game. So I called him up for you. Sorry, I'll give him a call up. We'll say Jacoby Stevens comes up as one of those guys that you take from the C19 list from the practice squad and put him on the game, active game day roster because of that. So that would basically give us, Jacoby Stevens, Sean Bradley, and Patrick Johnson in the linebacker room. All right, corners, the secondary. I know this is the area that you guys would be the most intrigued by. Corners, I got Tay Gowan and Josiah Scott on one side, competing for reps, probably balancing them off between reps between the 2 of each other, Tay Gowan and Josiah Scott. And then on the opposite side, I got Zach McPherson on the outside. I know a lot of people are like, man, if Josiah Scott and Zach McPherson ever started playing inside, they could be quite good. Both of those guys, unfortunately, see themselves as outside corners, so that's where they've been playing for the majority of their snaps, which leads to a pretty interesting situation in terms of the nickel corner. I have Andre Chachere starting at nickel, so it would be Tay Gowan, Zach McPherson, and Andre Chachere, then you would rotate Josiah Scott in. In terms of who else is out there in terms of corners, you have a guy like Kerry Vincent Jr. that gives you a ton of depth, right? Kerry Vincent Jr. he's viewed as a nickel. He can play outside if you need him to play outside. He could also play safety. He's very versatile. Speaking of safeties, the 2 safeties I have for this game are Kayvon Wallace, and then I called up Jarrett Maiden just because if you look at the C19 list, you got Marcus Epps on that list, and you got Roddy McLeod on that list. Ideally, you probably don't want to play Anthony Harris if you don't have to, but he's probably going to have to dress just given the numbers. So that's how I have this roster kind of going into this game. But I'll get into my 46s and my 46 actives and like how I kind of shaped everything, and I'll explain why I got some of these people in here, and then we can talk a little further. I'll read your comments, everybody. So Offensively, I got Andre Dillard, Jack Anderson, Brett Toth, Sua Peta, LaRaven Clark, Casey Tucker, Gardner Minshew, Reed Sinnett, Kenneth Gainwell, Tyree Jackson, Jalen Reagor, Quez Watkins, JJ, Greg Ward Jr., Greg Ward Jr., Devontae Smith, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, Jalen Hurts, Landon Dickerson. Some of these guys just by numbers, because we have to have 46 guys, even though they're not going to play, and Jalen Hurts would normally be inactive on something like this, you have probably no choice but to activate them. Unless, look, now guys start coming back from that list, they would probably be activated, and then you probably deactivate a guy like Jalen Hurts on this game. You probably wouldn't have him as an active. So you got to keep that in mind. There's going to be some fluctuation that happens here. Practice squad call-ups offensively. I have Luke Juriga, Coyote Owasika, Kerryon Johnson, Jason Huntley, and Deion Kane. Remember, some of these guys, even though you can only elevate 2 normally, because we have the C19 list stuff going on, we're allowed to pull guys from the practice squad to replace them on the active roster. So because of that, I was able to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys offensively in here. Like I said, I think you can make a case for a 6th guy. I think you could definitely make a case for Richard Rodgers, but I'll talk about how I finagled the roster getting there, right? So defensively, who are part of the active 46? I got Derek Barnett, Sean Bradley, Andre Chachere, TJ Edwards, Tay Gowan, Javon Hargraves, Anthony Harris, Teron Jackson, Patrick Johnson, Ryan Kerrigan, Zach McPherson, Steven Nelson, Hassan Ridgeway, Josiah Scott, Darius Slay, Josh Sweat, Marlon Tuipulotu, Kerry Vincent Jr., Kayvon Wallace, Milton Williams, and I got my 2 practice squad call-ups because of the illness. I have Jacoby Stevens and Cameron Malview. Okay, so that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? 6, 7. So I know we got 12 guys in protocol, but I'm guessing we're going to get some of those guys back. So my contingency was to build in accounting for 7 guys not making it back. And that's how I filled that roster out. And then that gives me 46, and I did 2 game day call-ups because you can expand your roster to 48 with the practice squad with 2 additional players. Those 2 players were Richard Rodgers and Jarrett Maiden at safety. So I brought up a safety and I brought up a tight end just because of the nature of how short we are at position groups. So that's how I structured the roster. If you guys want to kind of look at PhiladelphiaEagles.com and think about how you would do it personally, go ahead and do it, and you can leave it in the comments, guys, and I'll go over it. What's up, Quez the Gray? How you doing, bro? Yes, we can't get swept by these jumps. What's up, Big Moose? How you doing, buddy? Big Moose said he would rest them. You would rest the starters and just play for the playoffs. Big Moose says, I think it will end up being the 6th seed because the LA Rams will beat the 49ers week 18 and eliminate them, making the playoffs and allow Saints in, and we end up playing Tampa in the wild card round. Maybe. It's very possible. Stephen Joyce said, what's up, man? How you doing, sir? I'm doing well, Stephen. NFC East B said, good morning, Gate. You can put me on the list too. Have to get to test because I have the sniffles and want to go to coyote hunting in Steven's backyard this weekend. I don't know if I have coyotes. I hope I don't have coyotes, but I do have a big open adjacent field behind me, so there might be some. Be quite honest, man. Rest those fellas. What's up, Dante? How you doing, sir? Big Moose said, Spotrac has us currently at $13.8 million in cap space for 2022. Will it rise with contracts expiring and dead money coming off the books? Carson Wentz, Alshon Malik, and how will we have? No. So Spotrac accounts for all that. So they account for the dead money. And we still have dead money even in 2022 for some of these guys. You got to remember, we're not free of Alshon Jeffrey or Malik Jackson because we got them with a June 1st designation, which means we split up their salary hits over 2 years. That's what June 1st means. So we're not actually free of those 2 contracts yet. We still have money carried on for 2022 with them. In the end, I would say that we could safely assume right now, and there'll be moves that happen, we'll have $6 to $8 million once you factor in what's going on with, you got to take your rookie pool out. So once you take your rookie pool out and you got 3 first-round picks, you got to count for that. 3 first-round picks is like remove, for the rule of 51, you got to remove the league minimum salary. So you take that $10 million, subtract, I don't know, $700 some thousand from it. So it's going to cost you like $8 million to pick 3 guys in the first round. And that's a conservative estimate, guys. So you got to subtract that 8 million from the 13, but then you got to, you got contracts, right? They'll restructure guys. They'll do some things to free up cap space. When Allie and I kind of went over the numbers, we both came up with the idea that they'll have between 24 and 30 when it's all said and done. By the time they get done maneuvering the cap and doing some things, the Eagles have between 24 and $30 million. Natiro said NFL players who test positive for COVID are exempted from testing for 90 days. Better get that ball out in 1.2 seconds there, Stash. Maybe. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think Andre Dillard and I think LaRaven Clark are still pretty good. I mean, yes, you worry about Micah Parsons against this lineup. There's no doubt about it. But the one thing Stash does do pretty well is he operates your offense to what it is, and he'll hit the check down. So, I think that, I think he can make it interesting, to be honest with you. I don't expect him to win. I mean, come on, man. We're playing our backups. It's kind of hard to win that type of game. But I think he can make it pretty hard on him. What's up, man? Cowboys playing everyone. Good old Jerry Jones was mad about last game. Hey, you do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. What's up, Show Enough? How you doing, sir? Okay, Queasy the Great says, I think I would play that. He said he would probably play the starters the first half if he was, making that decision. I can understand that, trying to, because we've been held out scoreless for 3 quarters in a row. So I could see the perspective of like, we do need to get some continuity, going into the postseason, especially early in games. I can understand that perspective, but it's risky, man. I don't want to, no injuries. We really can't afford a major injury. Natiro says, if Minshew plays with the backup O-line, it will only decrease his value. Not necessarily. Natiro. If he plays with the backup O-line against Dallas, who's competing, and he plays well, it's going to drastically increase his value. Depends on the circumstances of the game. Big Moose said, do you play Devontae to beat Deshaun Jackson record for Eagles rookie receiving yards? No, not for that reason solely. I wouldn't play him for that reason solely. Future said, I'm still evaluating Hurts, so yes, play him. I wouldn't risk somebody to injury if it's not necessary. Future, I mean, the only real reason I could see kind of saying like, okay, like play somebody like this is if you're playing for seeding and you just been like, okay, if we win, we know that there's a really good chance. We still need San Francisco to lose. But I think for the Eagles' perspective, when you look at the seeding, there's just not a whole lot in our control because we still need San Francisco to lose. And if San Francisco loses, no matter our result, I believe we do capture that 6th seed. So it's kind of like we don't even hold that destiny. So the only reason that I would even consider playing someone like Jalen Hurts is if I'm trying to establish flow and rhythm to the offense because we haven't scored points in the first quarter in 3 games now. So I could understand like, okay, like there are some things we need to shore up ourselves from a game plan and execution perspective, but you gotta be careful. There's no point in exposing guys to injuries when there's nothing to gain. Steve giving the running back the blitz pickup signal. Well, that's why I would definitely bring Kerryon Johnson up. Kerryon Johnson's actually a really good pass pro back. He would definitely be in there. Like, I would be a little scared if all I have in pass pro is Kenneth Gainwell and Jason Huntley. That would be a very scary scenario. Those guys are not pass pro backs. They're not blitz pickup guys. Kerryon Johnson's probably a little further along than Jason Huntley is, but neither one of them are exactly great at that. I'm sorry. Kenneth Gainwell is probably ahead of Jason Huntley. I don't know if I said that correctly, but Kerryon Johnson's actually a really good pass pro back. Future says, if we hit the playoffs like a bug on a windshield, think about it. Who did we beat? Doesn't matter. You beat who was in front of you, Future. To me, that argument doesn't matter because look at Green Bay. Who did they beat, man? Look at Aaron Rodgers' numbers against a horrible NFC North. You beat who's in front of you. Crazy how right after we go to a bum Washington team, we get the illness. That place is trash. Dante said, I think you treat this game as a preseason game. Play a half with most starters, then sit the second half. You're treating it like a dress rehearsal in preseason, basically, Dante? Like what used to be traditionally the 3rd game in a 4-game preseason. Now, I don't know, everyone's a little different with how they treat that now. It could be the 3rd game still. Some teams treat it with the 2nd game, but I get what you're saying. NFC East B says at Future Generations, 8-8 New Orleans, the only without a losing record so far. Show enough said he thinks that McPherson would make a better nickel than outside corner. I mean, a lot of teams had him pegged that way, show enough that he was going to be a nickel corner, but he wants to play outside. What's up, Messiah? How you doing? Romy won said Friday. Messiah said, rest all the starters. Really want to see all our backups corners play, especially Tay Gowan. We almost an 80% chance of playing the Bucks. No, we don't, Matera. That's wrong. I can tell you you're wrong there. Right now, the Rams hold the 2 seed. So unless San, that's really where it's going to come down to is what happens between San Francisco and the Rams. No, I kind of get your point, Natiro, because I think they play each other, right? The Rams and San Francisco. So, yeah, I kind of get your point now that no matter how that outcome shakes out, it kind of pushes us in the 6th seed. So either we're in the 6th seed and we're playing Tampa because we're the 6th seed, or we're basically Tampa loses and then the 2 seed gets slid. So, or I'm sorry, yeah. Well, no, because if San Francisco wins, then it puts us in the 7th seed. So it is a little complex there. So if San Francisco were to win that game, they would remain the 6th seed. The Rams would drop probably out of the 2 seed. Yeah, it's complex. I don't like this year with the whole mathematical formula of this stuff. Dante said, it's interesting. Would you try to play with the O-line, Jordan, Landon, Juriga at center, Nate Herbig, right guard, and Dillard right, or a left tackle, just to see how it goes? No, I wouldn't play Landon Dickerson at all. I mean, there's just no point. Like, what are we going to learn? We already know what we're going to learn. Juriga at center, maybe I would consider bringing Juriga up and elevating Juriga over Jack Anderson for center, and then have Jack Anderson as my left guard, then use Brett Toth as kind of your backup swing tackle. Sure. But hard to say, man. What's up, Romy? One more. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that, brother. I'm still working on it. It's not quite done. Why does Howie keep kicking the can down the road? We will never have a normal cap space to attract big free agents this way. You don't have a choice given the nature of how it affected league revenue, Natero, to be fair. There's no choice in it. You have to do it. And I would argue the opposite of what you're saying, actually. It's the opposite. By doing that, by kicking the can down the road and creating cap space in one season to forsake another season, you're actually creating the cap space for free agency. What's up, Jeffrey? How you doing? Philly halftime says, I would sit my guys because I don't want nobody hurt. You're in the playoffs. Michael Gallup just tore his ACL, and Devontae Smith tore his ACL. Towards ACL, everybody will be if he tore his. Yeah, I mean, the only issue you're going to have though Philly halftime at wide receiver is that there's just not a lot of guys to call up on the practice squad to come take reps. So you're going to have to dress them, and if you dress them, you're likely going to play them a little bit. But I don't think I would overexpose them to anything. We'll see what happens. I mean, some of these guys on the practice squad could get through the return to play policy, and then you could bring up a John Hightower. You could bring up, a Keyshawn Johnson or somebody else, and then you could sit Devontae for this game. That's the best case scenario, in my opinion. Future says, hope everyone had a happy holiday. Me too, man. Me too. What's up, Noble King? How you doing? Messiah says, wait, if San Francisco loses, does that put us in this succeed? Do they have to win to get in? They do have to win to get in. No, they don't necessarily win to get in. I think New Orleans is the team that has the outside shot. So I believe if New Orleans wins and San Francisco loses, because of the 3-way tie rules, essentially, even if the Eagles lose, basically the Eagles slide to the 6th seed, New Orleans takes the 7th seed, and then San Francisco's out. I believe is how it works. It's these weird 3-way roll tie scenario things that the league is picked up. So that's what Natiro was saying earlier, that technically as long as New Orleans wins, San Francisco loses, It doesn't matter, right? And then that's what he was saying about Tampa Bay, because if San Francisco wins or loses in that situation, you're not going to probably face the Rams as a result of that. Even though that's who we're slated to play, it's very unlikely it would end that way just because of the way that the playoff scenarios work. I think the only way that it kind of works out to where, all that still kind of happens is if New Orleans loses their game, then I don't think it matters because technically San Francisco holds a tiebreaker over us. It's weird, three-way tie scenario stuff that the NFL put in place. Messiah said 6 seed. I got what you meant. It's 5 inches, 9 chance the Eagles play the Bucks. 5 scenario. 5 and 9 chance. My bad, man. The Eagles play the Bucks. They're beat up. They're a little beat up, but they got Tom Brady, man. So I'm not going to project that they will or won't win a game. That's really hard to say because they do have Tom Brady, but they are beat up, man. If you're going to have to play one of those top teams, yeah, I mean, that's a team offensively. They're not even sure when they're going to get Leonard Fournette back. He might not be back for the wild card round. So that could be an interesting game. I think Hurts struggles in this spread-like offense, in my opinion. If you tighten the formation, Hurts won't anticipate as much. Hurts seems to have more of a rhythm with 3 tight ends. I think he can build off the running game and he can accentuate the running game. But I wouldn't say that he struggles in a spread offense. It's always run. It's what he's the most familiar with, sure enough. I don't think that we're the greatest at executing spread concepts, to be quite honest. There are reasons and there's rhyme and reason to why you do spread. And I would say that you would have to define what you mean by anticipate, showing off. I'm not really sure what you mean in that situation. In terms of throwing the football, he needs to anticipate more. He needs to throw receivers open instead of waiting for them to break open. That's kind of really one of the bigger knocks on him. And that's something you kind of see on his film quite a bit. He's got to be a little better at anticipating receivers. It's a chemistry thing and it's a trust thing. He's got to start trusting it more. He's got to put it out there for him. Man, we're not signing AB, guys. Is there any way to get out of Brandon Brooks' contract? There is. You can June 1st cut him or June 1st trade him if there's interest. You can get out of the contract. That's not a problem. If you do it June 1st, you get $13 million back towards the cap. So that's a significant portion. And I do think something's going to happen with Brandon Brooks' contract. Look, ultimately, there's always more than one outcome. You can June 1st cut him or trade him. If you outright trade or cut him without a June 1st designation, then you're only looking at I think closer to $4 million in savings. I would look to see them manipulate that June 1st rule because you can do that with 2 players. You can cut them early on June 1st so they hit free agency and that gives you your cap space. But we'll see. I mean, it's kind of a complex situation there. From now and throughout the playoffs, what players or positions can change your mind about your approach to the offseason roster? They're not really in evaluation mode of that yet, Dante. I mean, they probably have formed some thoughts. I mean, it's just natural throughout the course of the season. You're going to form thoughts. But they're probably not in full evaluation mode until you get a week or so removed from the season after you do the end of season press conference. Then you'll start moving towards evaluating with your coaches, evaluating with the scouting department. You'll start kind of doing that as an organization, and they'll look things over. If you're a guy and you're trying to fight for a roster spot, you take advantage of these games and you put something out on film to entice somebody. It's kind of hard to do in a 1-game span, though, to be quite honest. So a lot of that's going to come down to what they had you scouted as before, because if you don't have a ton of film to show, you're depending upon the scouting that they did preliminary to you. Natira said opinions on Mulata this Sunday. I thought he played one of his worst games. I haven't been able, so it should be out sometime this morning. It might be out now, but I went live at 9:05 Natira, so I can't. I don't know. I obviously I have a Game Pass connection in Europe, which gives me access to the All 22 sooner. I generally don't talk about those things, Natira, until I can see the film. It's hard to say without seeing the film. NFC East B said 2-9 LA, 1-9 Dallas, 1-9 Arizona chances, depending on the weekend's game. Yeah, I mean, after I thought about what Natiro said, it does make sense that it probably would be Tampa Bay just because of the way that fate worked out that Los Angeles and San Francisco are playing each other. So like no matter how that shakes out, it's going to kind of, the only thing I can think of where, and it's still going to move the needle, right? Because LA would still have to, well, no, I mean, if LA wins, so as I understand is if the Rams were to win, San Francisco loses, and then New Orleans loses, then San Francisco still maintains the 6th seed. The Eagles are still the 7th seed, assuming we lost, right? So then that would mean that we're still matched up with LA. So I don't know if I would say it's an 80% chance. And I know that, it's not like Natiro's saying that. He's probably reading a predictive model that's saying it. But I get what he's saying. Like, well, actually, like there's far more outcomes that lead to Tampa Bay at this point, even though Tampa Bay is not the 2 seed yet, because they're playing each other. But if I understand the models correctly and what they're saying is that if San Francisco wins, then it won't matter because then the Rams are going to get dropped down in those rankings, assuming what happens in the other games. And then in reverse, if New Orleans, you got that whole thing where Philly can lose as long as New Orleans wins and San Francisco loses, it's going to shift your seeding. So I get what he's saying. Like there's 2 separate scenarios to where the Eagles end up playing a different opponent than the Rams. But there's really, that one scenario to where you win, the Rams win, and then you get what I'm saying? Like the Eagles lose, San Francisco loses, and New Orleans loses. Then, the seeding basically just stays the same for what I understand. But like I said, I don't really like doing those things, man. It's like, to me, it's just kind of like you play who's in front of you. You know what I mean? Like we'll see how it all shakes out in the weekend, and you just kind of play who's in front of you. Messiah said, who is your favorite backup cornerback on the team out of the 900 that we have? McPherson's the guy I think that interests me the most, just because, we spent a 4th round pick on McPherson. I would like to think that there's, like we're going to get an opportunity to see what the organization saw in the young man. He's scrappy. He fights back to the football. He will take one from you. He's not slow, but he's not fast. He's average athlete. Got to get better with eye discipline. And the only way you get better with eye discipline is to see things, right? I mean, film helps, but field work is where you really get better with eye discipline. So we'll see. I mean, that's who I would say. I like Tay Gowan. Tay Gowan doesn't have a ton of experience playing top level competition, but he's got the measurables that a lot of people look for. So Tay Gowan is very intriguing. Josiah Scott, what I remember from scouting Josiah Scott is that he's a shorter guy. He's incredible in the short zone, to where anything that's 10 yards or under, if you give that young man an opportunity to jump the route on you, he'll jump and take the ball. He's really, really good as a short zone defender, which kind of fits what we do here with Gannon and that 2 high shell he likes to run. So all the guys have some flexibility. You look at Kerry Vincent Jr. Kerry Vincent Jr. is a very versatile player. He can play nickel, he can play outside, he can play safety. They all have their own elements of intrigue. You know what I mean? Big Moose said, would you get a wide receiver in free agency or the draft? And also same with the defensive end position. I think you use free agency to try to shore up your roster as best that you can, so that way you can take the best player available in the draft, is how I personally would try to approach something like that. But you have to do that based upon the amount of money you have. And that's, I think, and lies the problem with the Eagles, is that we're not $90 million over the cap like we were last year. So obviously we're going to gain some we're going to get some cap flexibility by roster moves we make. With that said, I do think this is one of the years that we're going to be heavier in the draft than we are in free agency, to be quite honest. I expect them to probably spend their money at wide receiver. I do think that you'll see them go for a mid-tier defensive end. I definitely think you're going to see them go for somebody that's maybe not the top end of stuff, but like they had Ogba, the defensive end from Miami. They had him at like $8 or $9 million. If I can get that guy for under $10 million, if I'm the Eagles, I'm going full press. He's a good football player. You put him with Josh Sweat, you got something at defensive end. Like, I mean, if a guy like that at that caliber you can get for that kind of price, I would probably go for it, right? I mean, there's some other guys out there. Hassan Riddick, he's not a traditional pass rusher in that sense, but the guy can get pressure on the quarterback, right? I mean, there's some other routes you can go, and you always got to factor in how he can trade. It's not always just free agency. He can trade for guys. So I like where you're going with it, that wide receiver and defensive end. Wide receiver, because we've already taken so many receivers high in the draft that they might just want a veteran that they can bank on getting open. And then defensive end, just because you want to get yourself in a position to take the best player available. And you are losing guys, right? Kerrigan, his contract expires. Derek Barnett's contract expires. You know what I mean? Like, you got Brandon Graham still technically here next year, but Brandon Graham is also, he'll be 34 years old by the time the season starts, I believe. So, I mean, I definitely think that you'll see some activity at both those positions you named. Now, it has to do with the value. Can you match the player to the value? Free agency is tricky to predict that. You get more than one team involved and prices start going up, and then you have to, at some point, you got to walk away. Philly fan D said, all I want is that we play a complete game in the playoffs and bleed into next season. Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying there, Philly fan D. It's not even really about necessarily winning, although a win would be great. It's about how we perform against better competition. I mean, if we're competitive and it looks like we've shored up some things and there's something to look forward to for next season with a couple of pieces added to the team, yeah, I feel that way too. How did number 11 clear protocol so fast without the jab? I don't know. It's an excellent question. I don't, to be honest with you, I'd have to see the transaction wire to see exactly when he got placed on, and then look over the NFL's guidelines with a fine-tooth comb because they just revised it. But from what I understand, if you're not vaccinated, it is a mandatory 10 days, even after they renegotiated everything again. They added some stuff. So I don't know. That's a great question. I honestly, I have no clue. NFC East Beast, my bad, man, said, which two players would you predict become June 1st casualties? That's an excellent question, NFC East Beast. That's a really good question. I only have one in mind right this second, and that's because of the nature of the contract. And that's Brandon Brooks, because Brandon Brooks' contract has the most money to gain from June 1st designating him. I don't know off the top of my head if there's anyone else that gives you that kind of cap flexibility by June 1st designating them. So there has to be like a significant gain there. You know what I mean, NFC East Beast? I would say that Brandon Brooks is definitely a guy to look for where that I'm not saying it's absolutely happening, but that's the guy that makes the most sense in that scenario in terms of the contract. I don't know that we have another guy that gives you that kind of crazy cap savings by doing it. Other guys, when you look at the dead money, you can't get out of the contract this year without incurring a little bit of a hit against the cap. Big Moose said the Washington no names have the worst stadium in the league. Hurts could have got hurt. Shaking my head. Yeah, that stadium is pretty rough. I'm kind of shocked that the NFL hasn't maybe stepped in and been a little bit more vocal about what happened. Somehow, even with both San Francisco losses and New Orleans losses and Atlanta wins, Eagles become the 6th seed. It's probably some tie-breaking weird scenario, NFC East Beast. I don't know with Atlanta. I didn't even look at Atlanta's record, but it's probably some weird tie-breaking scenario that's going on. Do you think we can win wildcard game with this team? If it plays at its best, sure. Chaos. If this team gives its best game, absolutely. I mean, look at it this way, Chaos. If you remember, this is not 2017's team. Don't mistake what I'm saying here. I'm just using it as reference to how if you catch fire at the right time. If you remember that 2017 team down the stretch, we weren't playing that well. We had a couple of really rough games where we just kind of survived them and won the games. And then we got into the playoffs and we had a really, really close game. I believe it was with Atlanta, and we survived that one on the last minute. I think that was the pass breakup with Jalen Mills. And then, then we exploded the next two games offensively and the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl. So, I mean, it's really about, like, can you get your best game? When does that best game occur? Are you at your best in those games? Because if we're at our best, I do feel like this team can compete. I think it's better than people think. But consistency has been the issue here. And we have not seen a consistent 3 phases of the game performance from this team against better competition yet. So I get why some people are really skeptical to say, like, yeah, we ain't seen that against better competition yet. I'd pump the brakes a little bit. And I kind of agree with that. Until they prove it, sure. Occam Razor says, I hope they can play as many backups as they can. What was with the Eagles keeping so many cornerbacks this year on an overreaction from last year? Probably to an extent, NFC East Beast, sure. But you also, you're dealing with Steven Nelson's a free agent at the end of the year. Darius Slay is 31 and he's quite expensive as a player. Or he'll be 31 and he's quite expensive as a player. So, I mean, all those things kind of factor in, no doubt about it. But I just think that they want to throw darts at the board and see if any of them stuck, and then get to the offseason to evaluate some of these guys. Free agent question: which wide receiver would they maybe land? I think that they're going to go with the guy that can either. I don't think you're going to get Devontae Adams or that level of receiver guys. I mean, Allen Robinson would be awesome. I'm not anticipating we're able to do that. I mean, look, I would love to land a player like that, but I just don't know that the cap space is going to line up there. But I'll leave the window open that maybe they value that enough to pay for it, because you're going to pay. That's going to be like $14 million or so a year if you get to one of those two guys. Easily $14 million a year if you get one of those two guys. I guess the way you could look at it is that like a Mike Williams and that level receiver makes some sense to maybe target, right? Big guy. I wouldn't say that he's special per se, but he'd be a good number two. He'd be a solid, dependable guy. He can catch the football. He gives you a nice wingspan radius guy. He's what we thought JJ would be. And it's a little disappointing that JJ didn't develop into that. You got Deion Kane in the practice squad, who's kind of a similar body style, but I don't think JJ or Deion Kane are anywhere near as good as Mike Williams, to be quite honest. Texas Eagle said, I'm late, Steve. He said, I'm late, Steve. Have you addressed whether you worry about the slow starts when thinking about sitting people? I did kind of talk about that a little bit, Texas Eagle, where I said, one of the reasons you may opt to play your guys maybe a quarter or a half, the starters, is because, we've gone 3 games in a row scoring 0 points in the first quarter. So maybe you try to establish some rhythm going into the playoffs. Sure. It's a cost evaluation. Like, you certainly don't want to expose your guys to risk of injury, but at the same time, you know what I mean? NFC East B says, do you think Howie will go fishing in Seattle for his white whale? Are you referring to Russell? No, I don't. Even though I think Russell Wilson is probably going to get moved during the offseason, I don't. I think he's going to end up like with a Denver. I think he's going to end up with an AFC team, to be honest. Not that I don't think he'll call and see what the price is, but I don't think it's going to happen. Occam's Razor said defensive end, cornerback, safety, or linebacker would be my first 3 draft picks. Defense, basically, give me something on the defense. I'd even add Occam's Razor. I'd even add interior defensive line, a defensive tackle. Fletch is getting up there in age. His contract's expensive. You got Milton Williams, who's a pretty good role player, really good interior pass rusher. One-on-one against the run game, against lesser athleticism, guys that just aren't the same athletic profile. He's pretty good, but certainly you could use another guy in that rotation with Hargrave and Milton Williams. Hassan Ridgeway's a free agent, but you probably could get him back for a reasonable cost. So, but definitely if I can find a guy in the first 3 rounds inside the interior defensive line, I think I would take that chance. All right. Philly Fan D said they had to change the non-vaccinated player rules so Wentz could play. I hadn't seen, like I said, Philly Fan D. It's hard to keep up with some of the dealings when it comes to that kind of stuff. I'm not really sure what happened. But the last time I heard, when the original negotiations were going on, when everything happened with Washington, that was not a part of the deal originally. That you still had to be off those 10 days. But I don't know what happened after that period. You know what I mean? After that period of time. So they may have added a rule in there that I wasn't aware of. I'd have to really look into the situation. I haven't really looked into it. Dante Hill said, would you be willing to move on from Fletch? I mean, he hasn't been dominant ever since the New Orleans fake punt. Not for what it's going to cost you, because so it's not that I'm not willing to move on from Fletch in theory. I think he's in his 30s. I do think Fletch is still a good player. I think you're still better with him than without him. But, assessing the value of the contract, what you're paying, all that kind of stuff, Dante Hill, I get the point of what you're making. But you're honestly going to take a hit financially if you try to move on from Fletch. You're not actually saving anything because of how much his dead cap is. So for me, I don't think that Fletch is the kind of player or the kind of distraction or issue to where you eat some dead money, right? Like if Carson didn't do the things that he did in the 2021 offseason and make the demands, I don't think the Eagles make that move. I mean, why are you going to eat money on that kind of contract for that kind of player? But once that happened, you know what I'm saying? I think the situation's different. I think if Fletch put you in that situation, then you're very much in a Carson Wentz-like situation. Not necessarily the external noise stuff, but to where if you eat it, you're eating a teeny tiny bit of your cap space. It's not a significant hit, but you're gonna incur it because the money you get back towards his contract doesn't outweigh the amount of dead money that's on the contract. So because you're going to eat so much of that dead money, it will affect your cap just a teeny bit. Messiah said, obviously you're going to say that we have a chance, but after the first round, depending on how it goes, do you think we will exit depending on the momentum we have? It's hard to say. Messiah, I don't know how good the football team is against better competition yet. I mean, it's a bit of an unknown. I have no clue. Offensively, I feel like that if we're playing our game offensively and we're getting behind this offensive line and you get Miles Sanders back healthy, if he can come back, and that's not a guarantee, guys, but if you can get him back, and he's healthy, and you got Jordan Howard back healthy, and you got Boston Scott, and you're behind this line, and you're using, Goddard and, Devontae Smith, and you get a guy like, Quez has a couple of good games. Offensively, we could be pretty good. Defensively, I don't know what to expect. Defensively, I'm writing an article. I don't want to give away too much, guys, but the article I'm going to write for you guys, the next article has to do with Jonathan Gannon's scheme, system, and some of the underlying numbers. So I don't want to give that away, but defensively, there are some very positive things from the analytics, but you got to factor in those 3 games because there was 3 games where we really played some pretty bad competition. So, you got to have to take a little bit with that. You beat who's in front of you. I'm not faulting the Eagles for beating up on bad competition and the defense performing well against bad competition. They did what you expect them to do, but I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know how you evaluate it without seeing them go up against a real good quarterback. Tom Brady, that level quarterback, right? Even Matthew Stafford, I think, is respectable, although he'll turn the ball over if you force him into it, right? The only really quality quarterback that I can think of we faced and had a lot of success against was in week 1 against Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's still a quality quarterback. He's not quite Tom Brady level in that area, guys, but I mean, he's quality. But you go up against the Aaron Rodgers and the Tom Brady's and stuff like that, it's hard to predict how the defense is going to play, guys. I have no clue how to predict that, to be quite honest. Natiro said, however, if we play our backups and lose against Dallas, playing the Bucs is more 50-50. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, the playoff scenario you laid out, Natiro, is pretty interesting because after I really thought about what you were saying, there's some aspects you're right about that. Like, because of the way that the cookie kind of crumbles, we might not end up playing the Rams because of that. And there's a very high probability we end up playing the Bucs again. Philly Fan D said there were talks about Sudfeld starting in the playoffs in 17. God, could you imagine that? We'd have definitely got bounced. Is Devin Lloyd a first rounder? Texas Eagle, I think he'll be a first rounder. I think, I could see the potential where he slides to the back end of the first into the early second, but it's hard to say right now. You're talking about January 4th. Combine hasn't happened yet. Deep evaluations of these guys from the front offices haven't happened yet. Guys are going to move up and down the boards as soon as they start having pro days, as soon as those type of things start happening. So it's hard to say with any kind of like real authority on it. But right now, he's definitely scheduled to be more of the mid to like 20s kind of area. Francis Christian said, we can win any game, play our style of ball, don't make mental mistakes. Yeah, it's hard not to do those things, though, when you play better competition. But I agree with you. As long as we're on our game, we'll be competitive with anybody. Oscar said, should the Eagles start preparing for the playoffs, Tampa Bay, Los Angeles Rams game now? They got to know who their opponent is. But, yes, the coaching staff should be doing some preliminary scouting on those teams, right? You should be definitely having guys that are mapping stuff out, getting a feel for what they do in certain down and distances. All that stuff should be getting recorded on both opponents. Philly Fan D said, Mike Williams is my top guy to get in free agency. I mean, don't get me wrong. If there was a possibility to get a guy like, Allen Robinson, I would be all in on it. But Mike Williams, I think, is that kind of area we would be in, where you get a respectable guy that can play the game. He can produce numbers. He's better. He'd definitely be the second best wide receiver on the team. Like, he's going to improve you. You know what I mean? And I know some people are like, oh, it's just not the name I wanted. I don't know that he's like he's not an Allen Robinson. He's not, a Chris Godwin level improvement. He's not, but he's solid and he can help you. Jeffrey McIntosh said, so Steve, what do you think is best case scenario for the playoffs? And do you believe that we can win a few games? The best case scenario for the playoffs? I mean, I don't want to project the opponents because you don't know how a team's going to, who's going to get into that rhythm once the game started in there. I will say that Tampa Bay is down some guys. They're definitely down some guys. The whole thing with AB, they're down AB. Chris Godwin's got the torn ACL. They got an uncertain status with Leonard Fournette. So I mean, they're down some of their potential playmakers, but yeah, it's hard to say. What's up, Akam? I still think that Gallup's a good wide receiver, torn ACL or not. I mean, a guy, he'll be. I don't think he'll be fully 100% of himself in 2022, but if you can get that guy for a 3 or 4 year period of time, Gallup can separate. Gallup can play. I like Gallup a lot, actually. I think he's widely underrated. The problem is I don't know how much Gallup is going to cost you. That's really the issue. But I mean, if the Eagles ended up with Gallup, I'm not hating that because I know Gallup can separate and he can win. I just think that Mike Williams is a better fit in terms of like being a big guy that can separate a little bit. He's got strong hands. He can be a red zone target. I think he can be those things that the offense is kind of missing. I think the Eagles are going to trade 2 of their first round draft picks. Do you think they're going to trade forward or backwards to Philly halftime? So do you think they're going to trade them for 2023 picks? Do you think they're going to trade them to move forward to go target a guy? Because right now, things are looking good. I mean, we might end up with the 14th pick. And if Indianapolis gets dropped, we can end up with 2 picks between 14 and 18. So, I mean, it could be pretty interesting. Dante said, I think we can go all the way Super Bowl bound. Honestly, C19 can change this to the point. Last man standing, and who knows, one victory changes, confidence, defense steps up. You're right, Dante, that there is an unpredictability to this in that we don't even know you don't know what's going to get hit. A team could go in and be completely decimated because of that. And now the NFL has put insurances in not to stop the games. They've said you can elevate as many players as you need to elevate from the practice squad once the postseason starts. You do not have to worry about if they've been elevated more than twice. You don't have to go through those rules. You can pay them on a practice squad contract and not an NFL contract to get around that. So you're right. I mean, it could definitely change things real quick. And the NFL would really put itself in a sticky situation if it backs down for their mandates for a guy like Aaron Rodgers or something. I don't think there's a way of wiggling out if you're the NFL. It's going to make you look real, real bad. Denzel Robinson said, win or lose this postseason, next offseason for us is going to be very interesting, Gate. Denzel, I'm with you 100%. I definitely agree. It's going to be fun, too. I mean, it's good to have excitement and fun back in the city again. Denzel Robinson says, how do you honestly feel about Miles Sanders long-term, Gate? The nagging injuries concern me. I think Miles Sanders is a better football player than he's given credit for, but the nagging injuries with him definitely, it worries me. If the contract value is right, Denzel, I'd keep him. But I don't know that I would go as far as say I'm paying him top 10 money. If I'm looking at like the value estimate between 15 and 20 in terms of running backs, I think he's good enough to keep around. I would keep him. But I don't make any projections of what the Eagles will do. I think running backs are a position that most teams see as very easy to move on from. The Gambling Hippie says, I'd love to bring in a big wideout, draft like a Burks, or bring in someone in free agency. There's some options in the draft. You're right. My guy Burgang 31 would be happy, but the I can't remember his name. It keeps slipping my mind right now. But the kid that's in the young man in USC, he's really good, man. There's a little Michael Pittman to him. He's not quite as big as Michael Pittman. I don't think he's not quite 220-ish, but he's one of those big targets that you can hit and he can run. He can give you that yak ability. Big Fish Little Boat said Dallas lost on purpose to avoid us. The Gambling Hippie said Fletch has way too much dead money to move on. Yeah, I agree. It's a lot. I mean, they were willing to, like, here's the thing. I don't know what deal was struck up. gambling hippie, but they were willing to move on if the right offer came along during the trade deadline. So, I mean, clearly, if the right offer comes into play, it will. But I would assume that Fletch and the organization talked, and there was some kind of an agreement that, hey, Fletch, if we can't move you at the deadline, it's very unlikely you're going to get moved during the offseason in 2022. So I would assume that there was some kind of talk between those two parties like that. You know what I mean? Because I don't think there's any animosity between Fletch and the front office. I think they like each other. You know what I mean? Like, Fletch has been here for a long time. He's been paid pretty well by this front office. NFC East B said, yes, they changed the rules for everyone who was non-symptomatic. Yeah, that's a good point. That part I did catch. NFC East B said, if they're non-symptomatic, it is a little different. Philly halftime said, if you get rid of Fletcher Cox, I think it's $39 million in the cap, not on the cap. So Fletch, because you have to factor in his base salary, you have to look at what the numbers are in terms of what you're saving from the base salary. And then you have to look at what the dead money is. Your dead money is all the things you guaranteed in the contract and that you promised the league to pay back towards them, right? So when you sign somebody, so one of the things I see happen a lot where people kind of miss what's happening is when you sign a contract and you get a bonus, a signing bonus. The player gets that money from the signing bonus up front, but the NFL team gets to use the prorated contract structure to take that figure and pay the league that money towards their cap over several years. So when you move on from a player, that's where the majority of the dead money comes from. As you look at Fletch for 22, he's got $1.1 million in base, so there's nothing to restructure, and he's $12.8 million in a prorated bonus. The majority of Fletch's money is coming from a signing bonus at this point, so he's already been paid out. His cap number is $14.9 million. His dead money is $40.9 million. A straight cut, just if you cut him just straight up, it's $25 million is what you'd get hit. If you post June 1st anything, a cut or a trade, you'd actually save yourself $2 million, but you're going to take a ton of money away from your 2023 cap. So that's kind of the way it works out, because remember, when you post June 1st somebody, what you're doing is you're getting an opportunity to pay it off over 2 years. So everything that's due this year, you pay this year in terms of the prorated money. But the rest of the contract, you get to pay that the following year's cap. So it's a little complex. But yes, if they outright cut or trade Fletch without a June 1st designation, it'll cost us $25 million in cap space, because that's how much dead money is on the contract. In which it's really difficult, because when Fletch only has $1.1 million in base money, that means he's already received the majority of that money already. That's just what we're paying back to the league, basically. It's just, it is what it is. That's what Natiro and some of the guys were saying about the frustrating part about kicking, the can down the road on contracts. You eventually run into these situations in time. You just you're hoping that the league's revenue, the pace of it, keeps track with you, so that way it's never a crazy figure like what happened last year. Dante Hill said, with the success of this team, who is to blame for last year's blunder? I blame Wentz and Doug, but mainly Wentz, then Howie. I blame all three parties. I think all three parties were guilty. I think Doug got into it with the front office over being limited over selections of his staff. I think the front office was pretty ticked off with the way things were being handled, and I don't think that they handled the situations very well. That's why you saw the breakdowns in contracts with players and it leaking out onto the media where people could see it happening pre-game, what was going on. And Carson Wentz, I think, got fed up with the whole thing because he was frustrated with the draft pick, Jalen Hurts. And I think he felt that the organization didn't trust him anymore. So I think all three parties are guilty. Only two parties wanted to leave, though. Doug wanted out. Carson wanted out. Yep. What's up, Fireman 2531? One mistake, they'll find it. N'Kobe Dean, Big Moose said, N'Kobe Dean, we need him, please, for the love of God, Howie. Do you think the front office accurately is seeing like the deficiencies that the team has and the fans and the media see? I sometimes think they don't. I mean, they got a bunch of people, that look over at Big Moose, so it's kind of hard to say. The scouting department's there. You got your coaching staff that consults on that kind of stuff too. So it's really hard to say, Big Moose. It's really, really say. It's hard. It's a difficult thing to say. What's up, LB in the house? What's up, Brunson? With the $9.99 super chat said, I say sit them. Make them play our backups. Appreciate you, LB. Dante Hill said Gallup or Quez Watkins. I'm taking Quez. I think Gallup's the better player, if I'm going to be honest, Dante. But I agree with what your overall point is, which is they're kind of similar. They're a little similar in what they do. But I think Gallup's a little better player right now. But Gallup's got an ACL. Quez is completely healthy. So I get your point. Like with the ACL and stuff, like, you already got Quez. Like maybe look for a Mike Williams or a type of receiver like that gives you a bigger target, stronger hands. You know what I mean? That kind of guy. NFC East B said 4-0, best case scenario. You go to the Super Bowl and win. Mandel Harvey, what's up, buddy? He said, you have money. You're not paying for quarterbacks, and Devontae Smith is cheap too. Get Devontae Adams. Why get a slightly cheap too? Go 1A and 1A plus. Because, Mandel, you don't have as much money as you're thinking. You don't have as much money as people are thinking. Edwin Solano said, what up, man? How you doing, buddy? Philly Hat Time said, trade out. I just don't trust Roseman. Yeah. Edwin Solano says, don't go for needs, best talent available in the draft. And I think that's what free agency can give you the flexibility to do, is to make sure that you shore up enough of, you get enough quality players in the building to where you don't feel like you have to reach for a position of need. I think we should all go defense in the draft with the first 3 picks. I hear you, Fly 23. We do need a lot of defensive talent. There's no doubt about that. My guy, Eagle Realist, came in and gave me the name Drake London. You're right. That's exactly what I was thinking of, Eagle Realist. Yeah, that's Bird Gang 31. That's his dude, man. Mandel Harvey said, draft dynamic defense, high, reliable, bruisers late, higher hands. My guy Dante Hill said, leave a like, guys. I appreciate that. Yeah, guys, if you're enjoying the content, if you can do me a favor, guys, hit that like button. It helps. Big Moose said, I hope JG gets a head coaching job. Get his non-aggressive zone, having cornerback 6 yards back out of here. Big Moose, I mean, Gannon's he's a tough one to figure out, man. I mean, on one hand, we got to remember he's, as much as Nick Sirianni's a rookie coach and a rookie play caller, Gannon, I'm not even too sure how much impact he had over if he was any part of the chain when it came to calling plays defensively. So, I mean, there might be a little bit larger of a leap for him to go in terms of that. So I do think you got to be careful because we've ran guys out of here before to turn out to be really good defensive coaches. So I do think we got to be a little careful with that. But yes, I'm also frustrated with at times how soft those zones are. I mean, I don't understand conceptually why he does some of that. It makes no sense to me. Mandel said the league is relying on self-reporting symptoms. Aaron Rodgers should have been suspended for reporting as immunized. League not required an exit protocol test is telling. Is what it is. You're right. There should have been a more severe consequence for what he did, but AB got away with faking a card and really didn't get harsh punishment either. So I mean, it's what I'm saying. Would you rather have a top 10 defense or aggressive defense? I'd rather have a top 10 scoring defense along with a top 10 defense that shuts people down. Sage, I agree with you. Lord Brunson said, but okay, Devontae, I want that record. Laugh out loud. He wants Devontae to play to get the record. How close is he, guys? How close is Devontae Smith to breaking Jackson's record at this point? Fireman 2531 said, thing is, our backups can compete. I agree. It's a good take, man. They are abusing the COVID rules. They all sit and they all also be able to bring practice squad bodies up easily. Howie and them boys be on point. Yeah, I feel like there could be a possibility of that going on too. Big Bird said, aren't we losing quite a bit of, hang on, guys in the offseason? I got to it, Big Birds. I scroll down and find it real fast. We are, to an extent. You're right. We are. Overall, I can go to Over the Cap and look at the salary cap tables. So the best way to do it is go to your salary cap estimator from Over the Cap. Just type in like Google salary cap estimator, Philadelphia Eagles, and then you'll see the salary cap calculator from Over the Cap. That's a really quick and easy way, guys. You can also use Spotrac. They got a good one too. But you can look and see who your free agents are. So currently, the guys that will have the meaningful guys are Jordan Howard, Alex Singleton, Nate Herbig, Greg Ward, Jannard Avery, Hassan Ridgeway, Boston Scott, Andre Chachere. And then you got guys that are just kind of expiring on their contracts, so there's no money on it. So you got Derek Barnett, Rodney McLeod, Anthony Harris, Ryan Kerrigan, Steven Nelson. I don't know why Jason Kroom is still in there because I don't even think he's on our practice squad or anything. I guess we must have him on some kind of injury designation, guys, but it's like 14, 15 guys in total. That's what's going on, Big Birds. So, yeah, there are some guys that are exiting. Absolutely. What's up, the Gambling Hippie, coming in with the $4.99 super chat. Appreciate you, buddy. He said, appreciate the morning show. Most content comes out midday to evening. If we traded for a Davante Adams, what do you think we would have to give up? For Davante Adams, you're giving up first-round picks. Yeah, Davante's going to cost you first-round picks. I mean, that's likely a Hall of Fame player. You know what I mean? That's probably going to cost you potentially more than first. He's a good football player, but I also think he's a free agent at the end of the year, so I don't think you'd have to trade for him. You just have to beat out the competition to get him, and I think there will definitely be competition. Christian Bradshaw said, now in the playoff mix, what's the best scenario for us to go far? In terms of like the matchup, Christian, I think there's something to be said that, there's a very good pass second, their secondary with the Rams is really good, but they can be run on. They can absolutely be run on. Tampa Bay, they have Tom Brady, and I'm not saying you ever count Tom Brady out of something, but being down AB, being down Chris Godwin, not having, a clear forecast of what's going to happen with Leonard Fournette, they're down some weapons. I think both of those teams in the right scenario, in the right situation, are beatable if we play our best game. The guy that worries me, and I know they've been down a little bit, I haven't really seen this team play a true running quarterback, a true threat, dual threat guy. I've seen mobile guys with a little mobility get us. I'm wondering how this defense responds because, when we struggle, it seems like we struggle to rally to the football and tackle when we struggle early in games. That seems to be a really big problem with us at times. And in the second half of games, we seem to clean it up a little bit. But also, Gannon starts bringing pressure too, and I think that helps because guys aren't coming from as far back. Dante said, where is the money at on this roster? I don't see it game day. In terms of who's the highest paid players. So for 2022, your highest paid players, it's a little complex because you got to look at the cap figures to see where you're at here. But, you got Fletch's over $10 million. He's at 14.9. Lane's at $15.7 million against the cap. Brandon Brooks is at $19.4 million against the cap. Darius Slay is $22 million in cap. Javon Hargrave is $17 million in cap. And then Brandon Graham is $9.4 million. Those are your highest paid players against the cap in 2022. But the problem is, and this is the real issue here, Dante, and I'm glad you asked that because it's a great question. The problem is you got guys like Fletch with only $1.1 million in base salary. There's nowhere to renegotiate that. You got Brandon Graham with $1.15 million. There's nowhere to renegotiate that. You can't move any of the base salary on that, right? So those two guys, you can't do anything to get cap savings for. You got Jason Kelsey's at $1.5 million in base salary. There's nowhere to move any of the base to get money back. The guys that can move base money for you are Javon Hargrave has $12.7 million, $12.75. So he's got a little flexibility to where you can convert some of his base into a bonus. Darius Slay is $16 million in base, so you can move some of his money. Brandon Graham is $13.4 million in base. That's why you get back $13 million if you move on from him. And then Lane has $7 million in base. So Lane, Brandon, Darius, Javon Hargrave are the four guys where you could play with their contracts to gain back some cap space. But yeah, that's kind of the problem is guys like Brandon Graham and guys like Fletcher Cox, there's nothing left. There's nothing left to negotiate on the contract. you can't really convert any more money. Just, you're pretty much up against what you can do with them. NFC East B said, I'd draft a wide receiver and a free agent linebacker or safety, maybe both. Superhero 18 said, I would sit out. I don't think whether we win this game or not determines anything in terms of seeding. So what's there left to play for, basically? What's up, Allie? How are you doing? She said, Gallup. I don't believe in the draft or free agents for players that are only slightly better than our current roster. I think Michael Gallup, though, Allie, in my opinion, is a little better than just slightly better than our guys. I think it's shading him a little bit, but because he's coming back off the ACL, I definitely think it devalues him if I'm the Eagles. Because I have Quez Watkins, who I think can be a very similar type player to a Michael Gallup. Gallup's still better. I'm not saying that he's to that level yet, but I mean, nonetheless, because he's coming back off of that, I just think you need a bigger receiver. I think you need a split end, boundary side, X aligned receiver. You need an X, in my opinion, or a guy that can separate. Ali said Drake London is a clear X. Why do you think of David Bell? Oh, what do you think? My bad, Ali. What do you think of David Bell, wide receiver at Purdue, as a prospect? Haven't broken down to that extent, Ali, but I watched him play last season when I was breaking down Moore's tape from Purdue, and David Bell flashed a little bit. I think 6'2", 6'3-ish, good size to him. Probably is going to be an X, split end at the next level. I don't know if he has the versatility to be that kind of like guy that can play in the slot as well. A lot of the big, tall guys that play in the slot have crazy speed. So, you get a guy like Michael Pittman Michael Pittman doesn't have crazy speed, but he's athletic enough to move around at all the alignments. You look at a guy like Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool has crazy speed for his size. I don't know that David Bell is that, but I haven't watched it close enough, Ali. So I don't want to weigh in and say 100%, but that would be what I would look at. Like, is he purely just a split end guy, or is there some versatility to where this guy can play as the boundary side, split end, X-line receiver? He can play outside as a flanker if you need him to, and he can move inside as a tall slot if necessary. Like, I think that's what you have to look for David Bell. And until I see more tape, I don't know. And I think his combine numbers and his pro day numbers will be really important for David Bell. But his film was pretty good. He flashed to me when I was watching Moore. And Rondell Moore was crazy good. But David Bell definitely flashed a little bit. Texas Eagle says, as rusty as our starts have been, I think we need to play them at least a quarter. To try to establish some rhythm. Yeah, the 3 games in a row without scoring points in the first quarter is a little concerning, definitely. Superhero 18 said, if we want to play Gannon zone the way he does, we need to draft a physical backer. I agree. Dante said, I'm using all 3 picks, +2, plus the second and third round, regardless of price. We can really overhaul this defense. I think it depends on how they value certain prospects, Dante, and what they think of the 2023 draft, too. I think that has to be factored in, because if the Eagles feel like, okay, we want to get picks for 23, I could see them trading back. The problem is it takes 2 to tango. You need another trading partner that wants to come up and take that. He needs 38 yards for the record. Whew. 38 away. And Eagles Realist said he thought it 38. Yeah, everybody's saying 38. Man, 38. I'd be tempted, guys. I'd be tempted to play him early, get him the ball a few times, get the record, and get him out of there. But I don't want anyone getting hurt over a record, man. There's no point of risking somebody an injury for a record. But I definitely could see it, man, because he's had that kind of season. It would be kind of special for him to break that. I'm sure he would appreciate it. What's up, Backyard Birds podcast? Steve, I believe the Jackson record is only like 38 yards, but everybody's saying, yeah. Allie, you're right. You're 100% right, Allie. I have no debate back on that one. The NFL cares more about money than they do COVID. C-19. Oh, I messed up there, guys. Yeah, I think that's absolutely, you're right. Yeah, definitely. How can anyone paying a quarterback pay free agent receivers more? Once the Wentz cap is off the books, how are people considering getting a $40 million paid with that? Paid with what? They're going to manipulate the cap to get it, Mandel. That's where you would go to players and you'd have them restructure their contract in order to afford the player. I mean, me personally, it's not something I want to see. I'm not wanting the Eagles to do that, but I would caution to understand, Mandel, that when it's a trade, it's not $40 million on the Eagles, because any money they guaranteed in the contract in terms of bonuses, unless it's roster bonuses, that's really the responsibility of the team that gave the money, right? Because they prorated it. So they've already paid that player the money, and they owe the NFL that. The Eagles don't assume that. So it wouldn't really be $40 million, it'd be a lot less than that, but your point still holds. Gandalf the White says, do you think they're going to trade this year's 2 out of 3 first-round picks to have the 2023 draft, possibly for another quarterback like Bryce Young from Bama if Hurts doesn't work out? Possibly. They may create assurances like that. I mean, that is very much possible. I don't know if they'll trade 2 out of the 3, but they might try to trade at least 1 to have some flexibility. It also depends on what they think about these prospects. It also depends what they do in the playoffs. I mean, if Hurts starts winning a couple of these games, I think that they're not looking at the 23 draft for quarterbacks anymore. I think he's already earned 22. In my opinion, I think he's definitely earned 22. I think if he ends up winning a game or so in here, it's going to be really hard to move off of him, even for the 23 draft. Backyard Birds podcast says 37 yards left for Smith to break Jackson's record. Everyone's kind of chiming in on that one. The gambling hippie, yeah, Allen Robinson's phenomenal, right? So Allen Robinson is definitely someone I want the team to look at for the X. Do you think he is washed up, or is Chicago just not using him correctly? Same thing happened with Alshon Jeffrey. Remember, where everyone thought Alshon was washed and he had a couple of years left in him. I think it has a lot to do with just how dysfunctional Washington is as a team and an organization. Robert Morrison said, what about Michael Thomas? It's the cost. It's the cost. I mean, the player, sure, Robert. I mean, Devontae Adams, Allen Robinson, Michael Thomas, of course, man. Those guys are some of the best. They're basically the top echelon of the league. But affording that cost, you know what I'm saying? Like, the Eagles would have to do a lot to be able to afford that, because that's definitely going to get you in free agency. And if there's a bidding war, even though the projections are about $14 million a season, it could get higher. Let's remember what some of these corners got paid last year and the year prior. The corners were already getting up to 13 or 14 million. Some of these receivers, they might eclipse 20 mil, guys. It's possible that one of these guys gets over 20 mil. Mendel said, are we considering basketball players? Lots of great athletes who just don't have NBA basketball skills can catch and hit. That's more of a scouting thing. I don't think that they just go look at the NBA for guys that are on the back end of the NBA rosters per se. But Christian Bradshaw said, I think the last game for us can be a Gardner Minshew scouting report for other teams' interest next year if they choose to move. Yeah, I think so too, Christian. I agree with that. 2020, what up, man? How you doing, sir? Will keeping J.J. Arcega-Whiteside for league minimum for his special team work and hopefully either improving him as a receiver or tight end? You can't. Well, yeah, you can. You can, Jeffrey. That's a good point. Because he's not on the 5th-year option, it does kind of save us a little bit with JJ, right? Because he was a second-round pick. If he was a first-round pick, I think it becomes very complex, but thankfully he's not. So, yeah, I mean, that's ugh. People say we can't bet on the NFL if they admit it's rigged. Casinos are rigged and they don't have a shortage of gamblers. It's about time we admit NFL. I'm not buying into that, man. That's propaganda bullcrap, man. Solo Bolo said, so technically he didn't break it in a 16-game season, right? Technically, you're right, Solo Bolo. You're absolutely right, technically. Technically, he fell just short. NFC East B said Kaiser White, outside linebacker, free agent. I like Kaiser White. I don't know what the cost would be. I'd have to look and see what like predictive models of what they're projecting for the cost there, but hard to say. Who's winning said this is Dallas week. Show up. Yeah, no, man. Yeah, no. there's no reason to expose yourself to injury to make a point about Dallas week when there's nothing to benefit or gain for the Eagles. Our seeding is pretty much going to be determined by factors that are mostly outside of our control in terms of being the 6th or the 7th seed. There's no point in potentially losing a guy in the playoff stretch just to make a point about Dallas. Like Sage said, Eagles will trade one of those first round picks to have 2 picks for 2023. It's so obvious. No way to pick 3 times in the first round. I got a feeling that something might, or they might trade back. You know, I think that's a possibility. Richard Gonzalez says, I hope we beat Dallas with their backups. How funny would that be? If Dallas starts their starters and Minshew beats them, that's bad. That's a real bad mojo for them. That would be bad. That would kill your momentum, that's for sure. Backyard Birds podcast said, correct, Solo, but doing dang close. But he's got one more season. True that, Solo Bolo. What's up, man? He said, keep up the good work on O-line. Want to see Daniel Fale. I don't know how you say his last name. I know who you're talking about. I have no clue what's that man's last name. In green. 2020 said, 90 people in here, only 30 likes. Please hit that like button and subscribe. Appreciate you, 2020. The gambling hippie said, imagine the quarterback controversy if Minshew goes in and wins with backups against the Cowboys. Heard they were playing starters. They are going to play starters. I still don't think there will be a controversy. I just think that you look at Minshew, and what Minshew can give you is the ability to execute your offense. And even with the backups in, he could be a problem for them. I think it's more so for doing Minshew a favor, putting out film and giving him an opportunity to showcase for teams like Carolina and others who may not be in love with the 2022 quarterback draft and need a bridge quarterback. Because then they might come after a guy like Minshew. Because I think Minshew is a very respectable bridge quarterback. I think that he's better than, like I said, I honestly think that Minshew is better than a handful of guys that start on Sundays. Natiro said, play first quarter of Minshew with the starters before subbing everyone out. Mandel said, G League players, Euro players not making money, more mature, like we got Mulata from rugby. Right, but you're talking about like a 4-year process, 3-4 year process with that. I mean, it's not, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if we're in position for that kind of thing. Do you think we need to replace Steven Nelson or resign him? I think you could live with or without him. If you can get him back, you're probably going to let him try the market out, see if he can't get a good contract. I think there's a certain value you just don't pay for a guy like Steven Nelson. But if he doesn't land and he doesn't get that big contract, then, yeah, bring him back. I mean, if you can get him on a similar contract you got him this year, I think he's respectable, and it makes you to where you don't have to reach for anybody. You can take the best player available, and if that's a corner, you're not worried about it. You take the corner, right? Steven Nelson's not going to deter you from taking a corner. The Philly Talk podcast says, that morning coffee for Eagle fans. I've been forgetting to even drink my coffee while I do this, guys. I get caught up in these comments, and then I forget I have coffee. What's up, Philly Mike? How you doing, bro? Gates, your thoughts on the O-line alignment on the diving Bosco touchdown? I loved it. And the Avery sack. Was that a green dog blitz? It might have been, actually. I think a lot, I have to go back and look at it 2020. I have to look at it today and see. I can do a breakdown on it if you want me to. Any wide receivers in the later rounds to help this offense? There's a guy coming out of I don't know how late round he'll be, but there is a guy that's going to be coming out of NC State who's probably not going to be a first or second round talent, but he's going to be he's a good football player. A guy that I would think is probably more so back towards the 3rd or the 4th round. Big, strong guy, can go up, can make catches. It's hard to say because I haven't gone through every single player yet, but like someone like that I would be interested in. I would also say that you can, there's going to be a few guys. There's always somebody. The problem is that Premier those premier boundary side receivers, the guys that really, really are talented, those guys tend to go pretty high in the draft. Like, if you can get lucky enough to pluck a Chase Claypool in the early third round, like what happened a couple of years ago, like, you're doing something pretty special. Like, it's really hard to find those type of guys in that round, in that value. I'm trying to find this guy's name at the same time, guys. But if you can do that and you can pluck a guy like that, then yeah, I think you take a chance on. Even though that Claypool's not like a true boundary, he can play it. And he's a tall slot. He can do a little bit of everything. But I mean, you got some like really late round guys. Like there's let me find his name. CJ Riley's okay, but I wouldn't necessarily take a chance on him. There's too many injuries for my liking. Let me see. Jeez, why are these things so far down? I hate when this stuff happens, guys. I'm taking a look real quick before I jump off for you guys. Hang on. Dang. Scrolling. Emeka Emezi, if you haven't had an opportunity to watch film on him, he's a guy that, he's definitely got some elements to his game. All right, guys, I'm going to go through because we've been on here now for well over an hour and a half. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to pull some guys that haven't had a chance to talk yet, guys, and I'm going to pull them up so that way they can get an opportunity. Romeo Bravo, what's going on, buddy? He says, great content, Gate. Please keep it up. Thank you. I appreciate that, Romy. Let's see. Spa City Chop, what's going on, buddy? He said, Gates, I say we sit the starters and hope we see Dallas first round of the playoffs. You think I don't know the scenario. I mean, I'd have to see the scenario, Spa City, to where they jump up to the 2 seed. I don't know the scenario. Like, it's so hard because everyone's so bunched together this year. Marky Mac, what's up, buddy? He said, Drake London looks great, but I'm scared of drafting from the Pac-12. As long as it's not an offense or defense alignment, that's where I get a little worried. Eagles has landed. What's up, buddy? He said, Gates, check out North Dakota State wide receiver Christian Watson. Yeah, you told me about him before. I got him written down to do film review on. He pops on the film. Trust me of this one. He's a big and fast receiver that catches the ball with his hands. I'm going to take a look at him. The reason they're asking about late round picks, Eagles has landed. And I can only really speak to the guys I'm familiar with, and I haven't had an opportunity yet to look at Christian Watson. But yeah, we're going to definitely take a look. All right, guys, it's been an hour and 32 minutes. I appreciate y'all so much. If I can ask you a favor, if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed the video, if you can just go ahead, hit the X out button on the comment section for a second and hit the like button as you leave out. I would greatly appreciate it, guys. If you're not subscribed and you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button. Appreciate you. And I'll be back tomorrow morning, guys. We're going to do this Monday through Thursday, 9:05 every morning. I am currently writing an article about Jonathan Gannon. I will post it in the community section as soon as it's finished, guys. All right. Just some notes. We got some guys coming on the team that will be writing for the team. I just need to give them the password and stuff to the website and get them set up, show them how to actually publish the articles with the configuration I have. And then we'll have a team of guys that's going to be writing for the website. So I'm excited, guys. Appreciate y'all. And I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. I'll probably see you guys tonight. I'll probably put out another video. All right, y'all. Peace. Later.